This podcast, The Legacy Room, is going to be about faith, finance, dealing with business, investments, things that are just a little bit external and extending the conversation outside of the four walls of the church. I'm excited to have one of my mentors, a guy who I've known for many years. He has been a great asset to this Central Florida region. He is the founder and the lead pastor of Word Alive Ministries in Lakeland, Florida. A church alive is worth the drive, I hear. And so I wanted to introduce and have a conversation today with Pastor E. Tellifer Pickett III. How you doing today, Pastor?
Pastor Brown, I'm doing great, man. How about yourself?
Man, I'm good. I'm good. This is a great season to be alive. All is well. How are things going with you?
Man, going great, man. Just trying to keep the car in the road, man, between the lanes
I hear
and,
you.
taking one day at a time. That's where I am in my life, man. One day at a time, 1 hour, 1 minute, 1 second.
I hear you. I hear you. Pastor. How is pastoring in this climate? How is it that dynamic?
Man, I'm telling you, this is, to me, it's a tough climate to pastor in, man. You know, as a pastor, I love to preach the word, love to teach the word. But when you're dealing with ministry, man, there's a lot of competition, man. It's competitive, which it shouldn't be. But unfortunately, that's the way it is many times, man. But as far as loving the people, man, I'm going to continue to do that, continue to preach until I expire.
I love it. I love it. Now, how long you been pastoring?
30 years.
Wow, wow.
Yeah,
And
30 years.
and so, what do you think? Like some of maybe a couple of your top highlights has been in pastoring.
Man, really just watching people grow, watching ministry grow, the ebbs and the flows, the ups and the downs, but just building, and building people. I found out that building people is more exciting than building buildings.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, the dynamic of church has shifted so much. If you can, take 2026 Pastor Pickett and put it in maybe 2000 Pastor Pickett. What would you've done differently in 2000 preparing yourself for 2026?
Well, first of all, in all honesty, man, I wish I'd have been more watchful. In ministry, man, we get excited about where things are going, man, the open doors and the opportunities. But you still have to be mindful, man, that it's spiritual and there's an adversary. And I think that's where I missed it, man. And the excitement of ministry, you still have to be prayerful, watchful, and shut every door you can, man, to keep the enemy out.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I outside of ministry, I work in the financial industry. So I deal with investments, I deal with insurance, I deal with, estate planning, financial planning, leaving legacies and things of that nature. A lot of times pastors preach until they die. They walk in as pastors and they roll out as, you know, as the deceased or the late pastor. One thing that I've been teaching, and I got some people that's actually reached out to me. They want to know, Pastor Brown, how do I leave a legacy, a financial legacy? How do I prepare succession? What do I do in those cases? And I've talked to them about key man policies. And for those of you that don't know, the key man is a policy that says, hey, if something happened to the key man, how does this entity or this organization continue to move? Sometimes pastors have to stay in the pulpit past their time of physical ability because they have a physical requirement. And so, I'm sick, I got cancer, or I'm just, I'm tired and I need a break, I need a sabbatical. But because they got, a mortgage, they got debt that they're over, they're unable to take that time to actually self heal or just get that rest that they really need. And so, how important do you think it is, in succession planning? I know the AME Church, and other organizations at 75, you're
That's it.
done.
You're
You're
done.
done. How do you think, especially as a founder, how do you think succession planning plays into the whole part of your pastoral process?
Pastor, it's two words that come to mind, and that is save yourself.
Mm,
Save yourself. What I mean by that is you got to put things in place for yourself, because you know one day I won't be, even though my heart is with this thing, my physical abilities may not be there.
Right.
So you got to have something in place, as you mentioned, the key man policy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I had this big $1 million of debt, 1 point something $1 million. You know, we had a key man policy just in case something happened to me. That, you know, the banks can get their money to pay off the ministry. The ministry keep moving. But then at the same time, I've talked to some brethren in ministries, and the church itself doesn't have a plan in place to sustain them when they're done with ministry. So you have to look out for yourself, save yourself, get your own policies.
Right.
You know, do that for you,
Mm-hmm.
because you know, like I say, one day when you give it up, you know, you got to continue to live.
Right.
So you save yourself. Okay, you put in an assistant pastor who's going to continue this thing. There's a lot of ministries that's not even incorporated.
Wow.
They don't have incorporation papers to even have something in place. So I would just tell pastors, and when you have a church, make sure you're an incorporation. You got a corporation. Then once you have a corporation, once you leave, the corporation will take care of itself.
Gotcha. And I think that's important. Having things set up. I think every ministry needs an attorney, needs some form of CFO or CPA. And the most important thing they need is to have a clear movement. This is the map. This is what's going to happen if something should happen. I know, being a part of Rhema, Pastor Holmes already made it clear. This is what you guys do if I'm not in a position to move forward. Is that something that every church should be doing, or is every church kind of move? Has a little bit of autonomy in how they handle succession planning.
With life, we know that death is just as much part of life as life is. Something can happen tomorrow.
Right.
Then what?
Exactly.
You see, what's going to happen to the church? What's going to happen to the people? So wisdom and just the love that you have for your church, your ministry, should just channel you to want to do something to keep the legacy of the ministry moving.
Right.
A lot of ministries shut down because there's no succession plan.
Yeah, for sure.
So you put that together, put it on paper, get you an attorney, get you an attorney who understands church.
Right.
Not every attorney understands church.
Absolutely.
And how to move it forward. But you get an attorney and sit down with them, sit down with your ministers, and appoint one. You may have a lot of associates, but you got to appoint one who's going to lead this thing after you're done.
Absolutely.
And that's very, very important, man, because you're dealing with finances. What's going to happen to the finances of the church? You know, a lot of people think that, okay, you got this church, you got this money. Who gets the money when the church, if something happened to the pastor, does his family get it?
Exactly.
No, the corporation would take care of itself, because everything is outlined. What do you do when you dissolve a corporation? Not many people understand that there's something you have to do once the corporation dissolves.
Right.
You just can't do anything like, well, man, his family going to inherit all of this, whatever. So people be thinking of that. But once you outline it, address it in business meetings and those type things, to ease the people's mind that, okay, if something happened to me, we're going to continue to roll.
Awesome. I think it's important. Another thing to talk about, especially those of you that are watching, that it's not properly set up. If your church is in your name exclusively, you can potentially put the church into probate if you don't have it in a trust or an executor of the trust. If something should happen, I have a church actually that I'm dealing with in Tennessee. The church was in the pastor's name, and the pastor passed away. And now they're trying to figure out, what do we do with this building? Because it's in the name of the pastor. He didn't have a will. And now his children is fighting over a church that technically should belong to the church. So pastors, even if you're going to protect yourself and use a church building as a mode of leaving a legacy, it's important that you put that in a trust. Don't have any houses or any kind of assets in your actual name. Everything that you own needs to be in a trust. If you need help setting up a trust, just inbox me. I can either set you up with an attorney. If you're in Florida, more than likely I can probably help you to set up a trust, because that reduces the ability to go to probate. So now there's not a judge or someone telling you, hey, this is what you can do with this property. And it could be years. So now this church that was thriving, hundreds of members, can't even get in the building because a judge has ordered the building to be locked while they go through probate. So it's very important. I'm not telling pastors not to prepare and to take care of their families, but if this church is built for the church, it needs to be in the church's name, even if
Right.
there's directions on what do we do with it. I know one thing, just keeping it 100 as a pastor, that the banks is not calling your members if there's a debt. They're not calling the deacons. The pastor, the pastor. I mean, I had a situation where a former church that I pastored was sued, and we was held in contempt of court. And guess who they held responsible when we was held in contempt of court? Anthony J. Brown. I got an orange jumpsuit to prove it. And it was crazy because I'm like, hey, this happened before I even got here. I wasn't even the pastor when it occurred. But I found out through a judge that the main man, the main person, is the lead pastor of a church. So be careful if you want a title, because sometimes title come with other stuff. And so I think it's important, Pastor, that we protect ourselves. And another thing that I think is important to converse about, I don't know if you was blessed to have a pension, but I worked for AAA for some years, and I'm blessed to get a pension whenever I get 65. It may be 67 at that point because they keep moving the market, they keep moving the goalposts as it relates to retirement age. And so I told them to get an annuity, and you can do what's called DCA, which is dollar cost averaging, meaning you put a little bit in there and let that annuity start building itself. You can do a 10 pay, a 20 pay, a 30 pay. And so when you're ready to turn on your income, it turns on the income and it supplements what Social Security is not able to take care of. Because let's just be honest, 40% of Americans, which is a very unfortunate number, live off Social Security only. That's their only source of income. And as a pastor, the Lord told us, He's given us all things concerning wealth. He wants us to be good at God and good at life. And the thing is, a lot of pastors will have, $2,000 suits, but no life insurance. Or, they'll have a Bentley and a Benz, but don't have stuff set up in order. Because a lot of times, we equate the success of the pastorate based off what he's driving and how many people he got and how many buildings he's had. But, as I've been pastoring, almost 20 years now. I've been in the ministry, and I'm learning something, not only through my pastor, because one thing about him, he ain't big on the acoustics of that kind of stuff, because he's building something that has substance, and investing in assets. Because we pastor, those of us that pastor in predominantly Black church, we're dealing with a consumer led persons. A lot of the African American community are consumers. We consume almost $2 trillion in stuff that is not investable. In other words, we putting our money into hair, into vacations, into cars that are depreciating assets. And so we have to show them through an exemplary movement, hey, put your money into things in that's going to matriculate and it's going to grow value, versus just having everything in something that's going to, the first way to become a millionaire, 90% of millionaires became millionaires through real estate. How many people in your church owns a house? How many people in your church have retirement? How do we set this up so that we're not depending when we turn 75 or when we turn 80, we're not dependent on the church to take care of us. And God forbid, and I don't want to get off on a tangent, because I got some funeral home experience too. But how do we make sure that it's not the church's responsibility to take care of your wife or your family once you expire? What and I'm not asking, we don't want to see your personal financial statement, but what type of assets do you think has helped you in preparing to retire, preparing to live that life where pastoring isn't always going to be your primary source of income?
Pastor, going back to something you said earlier, financial literacy. I found out that, if I get on a series as relates to financial literacy, you can watch gradually as people begin to not show up, because that's something that they really don't want to hear. But at the same time, if we go for gimmicks and gadgets and, prophetically speaking that the Lord wants you to be a millionaire, and and throw out some numbers and tell them to put some money in the pot, and this is going to happen. Then people show up for that because they think it's just going to happen by happenstance.
Right.
But you got to plan this thing. You got to plan it out. I was blessed to work for a company in the city that had stock, and thank God that I purchased some of that stock. And every time I see something in the paper about the dividend, I get excited because I know a check is headed my direction.
Absolutely.
And then you do other things like annuities. When I did retire from the company, and I took some of my stock out where they had two kinds at that time at the company I was working for. What I had to take everything out. So what I did then, I just took some of those resources and I vested it in like money market and some other things that's growing.
Yeah. So you didn't accumulate your wealth. So just for the people that's watching in the back, you didn't accumulate it from Sunday mornings.
No. I mean, most of the time, in all honesty, in my 25 years, my first 25 years of ministry, basically we were in debt. It looked good on the outside, cars parked on the outside, people in there, but I had to check and see what came in through tithes and offers.
Oh, absolutely.
The bank didn't care how much we prayed, how many conferences we had, how much fasting we did. They wanted that money.
Yeah.
And then at one time, I think we got up to maybe I had to pay $15,000 a month just to keep the buildings moving. That's not counting the insurance, the salaries, and these type of things. So, man, finally after 25 years, I was able to breathe.
Right.
When we paid off that debt and got out of debt. Now you can breathe. Now you can do ministry.
Right.
So people look at things that's grand and they think it's all right, but there's, like you said, there's somebody behind that whose name is there that's responsible for that.
Yeah, it's called a guarantor.
Come on.
And that guarantor means I guarantee you that if they don't give, we gonna give.
Sir, I can sleep at night, man.
I think it's amazing. I know the Lord blessed me to get a particular car that I love. And I work 60 hours a week. I mean, every week. I go get it. Pastoring has never paid me to live a certain lifestyle. I got it through working. And this particular lady, she, they park your car at the front, which I stopped at. I parked my car at the back. You didn't even know how I got here. And the lady, she walked up to me. She said, "The church must be taking good care of you." I said, "Ma'am, I'm the number one tither here. And most months, if y'all don't make the note, I got to come out of my pocket and take care of what's not taken care of." The old adage that, the offering goes to the pastor. That used to happen in certain churches. I just ain't never pastored one of them. And so it's amazing that we as pastors, we have this kind of, this connotative thought process that, hey, if we give $1,000, it's going to the preacher. That is so untrue.
Man, that's bogus.
And so I told my assistant, I said, go get the tithing report while she doing all this talking. And that lady who was driving a S550, and if she's watching, God bless you, she gave a total of $238 for the whole year. The whole year. I didn't have a car note, but I bet you if I had a car note, it'd have been more than $238. We don't have no bills in our church that's $238 a month, let alone for the year. And so sometimes people would assume success is attached to what they're giving, not knowing that, there's investments and there's other things that's going on outside of the church. Because let's just face it, most pastors are entrepreneurs on some level, or they're still bivocational, they're still working. One thing that I wanted to make sure that in this legacy room, and as we're talking legacy, because I think it's important, the Bible says that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. I think it's important that we have hard conversations. The death toll of a pastor has shifted significantly, where, the average life expectancy of a pastor has dwindled by almost 20 years over the last 30 years.
Wow.
It's because of the stress of trying to keep up with everybody else. These big buildings and all of this stuff and attributes that come. I'm changing my perspective on what a successful pastor looks like. I'm changing my perspective on what success is altogether. It's not about the cribs, the cars, and the clothes. It's about having that peace of mind. And so if that peace of mind means that we're meeting at a high school gymnasium, let's do it. You know what I mean? Because God is not in the building. God is in building the people. And if we can't do ministry because we have these, at one point I pastored a church that had a $50,000 a month overhead. Do you know what level of stress that is when you're already trying to make it happen, but you hoping that a certain car pull up or a certain group of people pull up so that we can meet the debt? And so I don't want to pastor it. I don't want to be at a place where I'm trading service to take care of musicians only, or take care of just the overhead, and we're not able to really go out and impact the world for Jesus Christ. I know, I have a responsibility because, the Lord has blessed me to have knowledge outside of just biblical principles, but knowing how to actually engage the marketplace. And so as you're engaged in the marketplace and you're in a situation where you're having conversations that a lot of churches aren't having, what do we do with grief? What do we do with our entrepreneurs in our church? We can't just have a group of entrepreneurs, but we're not telling them, hey, when you own a business, there's certain type of insurances you need to have to make sure that you're mitigating against loss if someone should scandalize your name, or if something should happen with one of your products. You got a hair business and somebody's hair falls out because you left the process PCJ in the jar. You left it in too long, or we need to be able to engage those conversations on what do I do now. We're good at asking for the 10.
Right.
Give God the 10.
Right.
But now we're not telling people, what do you do with the 90? What do I do with this 90% that's left? Because I think being a good steward, I remember a situation that pastor had, total man, total victory. And he wanted to make sure that we was dealing with the total man, not just the spirit man, but what do I do with my natural life? How do I invest my health? And how important is that to teach people more than just Genesis through Revelation, but teaching them, hey, how do I walk out this life?
Pastor, when I remember one time I showed a video how this particular race of people systematically took over the hair care industry. And I had some people in the church that really got upset. Why you need to show something like that in the church? No, I'm trying to teach you how to deal with your finances. We have people, like you say, when funerals come, can the church do this? When somebody pass away, one thing I don't like to see, Pastor, is like the GoFundMe thing, or standing on the corner with buckets, to gather money when a loved one, passes on. But wait a minute, hold up. How much is a life insurance policy? They don't think that information should be at the church. Teach us about getting to heaven.
Right.
No, you got to live in the present. How can I get this income coming to me? You may have more in your hand than what you realize, but nobody never taught you about budgeting. How to budget your income. Thank God I was in a family. My mother was in business most of my life. And I watched her do her book work. She taught me how to put something back, how to save. She said, you need to put something back for a rainy day. There's going to be some rainy days, but how many people actually save?
Right.
Unfortunately, even in America, in this land of plenty, man, there's a high percentage of people who lives from paycheck to paycheck.
100%.
But at the same time, I heard one pastor said, if I ever find out who the Jones family is, I want to talk with them.
Yeah.
Because we want to keep up with the Joneses. We want to come in church with $500 or $600 worth of clothes on, but give God $1, and then when something happens, they come to the church, and when the church doesn't come to their rescue, they feel like, what kind of church is this?
Wow.
So financial literacy is so important. It's vital, especially in these days in which we're living in, because there is a shifting going on.
Oh, absolutely.
When it comes to money. We know, biblically speaking, prophetically, it's going to the haves and the have-nots.
Right.
So now we got to address this, because if people are in the church, the first thing they're going to do when they come on hard times, they're going to come where?
To the
the church. And then there are people who are not in the church. What's going to happen when they come on hard time? They go to where? The church.
They're going to go to the church. And so, we love to talk about church hurt. If I could get $1 for every time I heard the term church hurt, can we talk about Pastor Hurt for a minute? Can we talk about investing? The Bible said, "Don't take your pearls and cast them among swine."
Man.
And sometimes it's hard to have that conversation, but it's necessary. We're human. We bleed. I heard somebody say once, "You put on your pants just like I do."
Yeah,
Okay, yeah,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely. But I got to put on a cape too. You don't get to
yeah.
put on a cape. It's crazy to think about. There's so much other things. I was talking to a very wealthy lady on yesterday. She came to my office because she needed to get some stuff handled. And she was talking. She's like, "Well, Brown, I got my succession plan together. I got my life insurance. She got life insurance. I think she's 37 or 38. She got a $2 million life insurance policy for less than $100 a month.
Whoa,
Less than $100 a month.
whoa.
You can't even get your nails and toes done for less than $100 a month. And it don't cost a lot when you're younger. You gotta remember the insurance in the days of our youth, because when you get older, that same policy can be significantly more expensive.
Yes.
So I started talking to her. I said, "So what? How much are you paying in taxes?" She's like, "Well, I'm paying this amount of taxes." Okay, let me show you. You could take this money that you would have paid in taxes, and now instead of paying for this particular policy, get an IUL or another type vehicle to save in taxes. And so we're talking through all of these. And I asked her, I said, "Well, what if you don't die, but you go into like a critical illness or a disability scenario? The leaning tree ain't always the first to fall, and everybody sick ain't dying, and everybody dying ain't sick.
Yeah.
So you got to understand what happens if something happens where I have a stroke, or I find myself in a car accident where I can't move anymore. I can't do what I'm doing. How do I succeed?" One of the top reasons that people go into financial devastation, first is lack of health insurance. That's number one. You'll be amazed how many pastors don't have health insurance.
Wow.
If your wife don't work, or if you're not married, if the Lord bless you with a new wife, make sure she got a good health insurance plan.
Yes.
If you don't have things set up in certain cases, a lot of pastors don't have health insurance. It's incredible that you would ask a church for a car allowance but not health insurance. Like that is incredibly important. Do you know, outside of the president of the United States and a neurosurgeon, pastors is the third most stressful occupation.
Definitely, man.
It is crazy. And so, I was telling him, I said it's important that, health insurance is important, because that's the first thing that sends us into bankruptcy. Number two, long illnesses, critical illnesses. If you're not able to get in your pulpit for weeks on end or months on end, how do you survive? And so there's long-term care policies and other things that are in place that the church needs to have. I tell everybody, this is what you should do if you want to come to me for financial literacy. I do a 10-10-80. 10% go to God. You need to save 10%, and then you live off the 80%. If you can't buy it twice, don't buy it at all. And so there's certain little movements that we have to have in our personal life, and that needs to then navigate over to the church. I love to see success, but I don't like to see this new social media success, because we've turned pastors into like almost like these celebrities.
Right, right.
I watch my YouTube, or I mean my Facebook, and I notice they got the cameras watching the pastor get out the car, and they got to watch him walk. Oh, that's a little bit too much. That's not really what the job of a shepherd is really set for. Not for us to be celebrities, but for us to pull people. And sometimes you got to pull them out of debt. You got to pull them out of the thought process and the ideology that, hey, this is how it goes. And I think that's the reason why we're having a lot of little pop-up shops. I think they're supposed to be churches, but I call them pop-up shops,
Yes.
because they see the glamour of the
Yes,
pastoralship,
yes,
but they really don't know how much sacrifice and how much labor it takes to do that. And I think another part to the succession plan, which is where we was headed at earlier, I think we kind of deviated a little bit, is what happens when the person who think they should succeed don't become the successor. A lot of organizations have been birthed that way. I remember a major organization, they just knew that this guy was going to be the next in line, but the bishop chose another bishop, and then it split and created another organization. And so the question is, how does that church still survive if there's a split or there's something of that nature, because the man who wanted to be the man didn't become the man, and then now he becomes Absalom? How do you think we navigate those moments?
I don't know, Pastor. That's so difficult, man. Especially when you're dealing with a church split. Because even though the church split, if that church is in some kind of financial crisis, you still owe that money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so unfortunate, man, that happens in ministry. It's going back to something you said about pastor hurt.
Mm-hmm.
These things happen in ministry. They shouldn't, but they do. And I wish I had a concrete answer to your question, but I just don't, man. Church hurts, pastor hurt is just something you have to deal with. I was sharing with my ministers, I liken a pastor. I say, have you ever seen a boxer that's warming up in the gymnasium, and he has that overhead bag?
Mm-hmm.
That's the one where he just,
Right.
just knocking it. And I say, every time they get ready to get off of that bag, they wind up and give it the biggest punch that they can, and that bag is on a swivel, just go round and round and round. But when it stops, it's right back where it started from. And I say, that's the pastor. He gets hit, he gets hit, he gets hit. But on Sunday morning, he's right back where he started, in that pulpit.
Wow. Wow.
And some people think it's glamorous. And unfortunately, that's where we are today. The success of the church is measured by the success of the pastor. Then sometime when the pastor seem or look too successful, then people start questioning how they get this money, how they living off of this. You're the one that's keeping them up like that. So if I just, I watch people, first they start moving around in their seat, because most people are, we're habitual creatures. We're creatures of habit. So we sit in that same spot. Everybody know that sister so-and-so seat. She didn't have to put a name on it.
Right.
But that's just where they sit.
Right.
Now, when they become a little disgruntled, they start moving because they want you to know that, hey, I'm moving, I'm shifting. But if that doesn't get your attention, then the next thing is they start taking away from the offering.
Right.
They start drawing back from that one. So now that's that's an indicator that something's going on. They're about to leave out of there now.
Yeah.
So now you're supposed to come to that rescue, say, hey, what's going on, sister so-and-so, brother so-and-so? So what's going on? But I found out that, once they get it in their heart, they're gone.
Yeah. Go ahead and
The
go.
best you can do is keep them there 2 more weeks.
Yeah. And I did a lesson a few years ago on the appropriate way to leave a church.
Jesus.
You got to leave quietly. You need to leave quickly, and without a lot of conversation. Because a lot of people, they don't like to do nothing unless they have a crowd with them. So I'm mad. I'm mad. So I got to call 6 people to say, how your spirit feeling? How you feeling about it? And so if they can't, they ain't brought nobody to the church. But when they leave, they want to take something with them. And so I was like, it's okay. Seasons change. Everything according to Ecclesiastes 3, there's a time in the season. Yes. So seasons change. It's fine. But the way you leave talks about your character. It speaks to your character. You don't have to tell the world when you got an issue. It's not everybody's issue. And sometimes they'll tell the world before they tell you. And, even in life, when you die, I've been to a lot of funerals. I've been to a lot of funerals. I've seen people die together, but it's buried separately. I've never put 2 people in the same hole at the same time, ever. And I've been doing funerals for over 20 years. I have never, even if they died together, we've done multiple funerals, but everybody was in their own box. And I've never put multiple people in the same hole. So when you come here, even if you're a twin, y'all wasn't born at the same exact time. You know what I mean? Right. So we come in here by ourselves and we leave by ourselves. It's that dash. What we handle in between speaks to not only the size of our funeral, but the impact, the legacy. I don't want to pastor for years and retire, and only people remember is that I can sing or I can hoop or I can holler, but they don't know, hey, because this guy was in my life and because I had a chance to sit underneath his ministry, this happened. I had a member come to me, her season changed, yada. And yes. So I used to get an attitude. I think you hear that, you hear so much, but okay, just bye. You'll see you later. Yes. May the Lord watch until you meet you and D. And the Lord made me look at that thing different. He says, hey, how long was she at your ministry? how much did she, contribute? Not just financially, because we know the tithe is talent and treasure as well. It's not just your money, but your time and your talent and treasure. And so I had asked my question. What did she do to extend this ministry, to help in legacy? And so I know she was expecting me to respond traditionally, and I say, you know what? I want to thank you for these 2 years that you
Yes,
served.
yes.
Because of your servanthood, you've pushed the needle further. We're a little bit better because of your contribution. And when she heard my conversation, more of a gratitude than a begrudgency type transaction, she actually ended up coming back at a later time.
Mm.
Sometimes you need a Selah, a Selah moment to
Of
realize that
course.
it really wasn't, as bad as I thought it was. Sometimes you can get tired in the work, but never get tired of the work. And
Mm.
I think even in building a ministry, I would hate to see these beautiful churches get built and then something occurs where after the pastor died, the ministry died right behind it.
Right.
So what do you think with Word Alive? What's the trajectory of Word Alive when E.T. Pickett isn't the senior pastor?
But my prayer is that the ministry continues to go, the ministry grow and flourish. I want it to move forward. I don't want to leave and everything go down. So that's why I do my pastors' leadership workshops and these type things, because I want them to, not have my spirit, so to speak, but God's spirit, and try to keep the spirit of the ministry moving forward. I don't want the doors to close when I die. I want this to move forward so people can see Word Alive Ministries 40 years after I pass away. It's still moving forward. So,
Wow.
I'm training a pastor right now and his wife to take over the ministry. If it was up to me, I would have been gone 5 years ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
I've been trying to move out for a while, but I can see it on the horizon. I tell people, I want to preach until I die, but I don't want to pastor
I'm with you.
until I die.
I 100%.
I don't want that.
Preach until you die, but don't let pastor kill you.
Yeah, I want to travel in ministry.
Right.
I have connections. I still have connections overseas and places I've gone and preached over. Virgin Island, Jamaica, South Korea. These places that I've gone and I've ministered to. I want to be able to go back there. To do conferences and leadership conferences or workshops.
Wow.
That's what I want to do. I don't want to have to deal with people for the rest of my life. As you said,
Yeah.
pastoring, that's the third leading cause of in a profession
Right.
of deaths.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stress them out. Pastors get stressed out, and people don't think that we do.
Right.
We get, I thank God for the brothering. I had a brother to come up to me a couple of weeks ago and say, Pastor, when are you going on a vacation? I thought about it. When was the last time I took a vacation? I may take a Sunday to rest, but I have never recently gone on a extended vacation, because it takes about a week for you to wash the ministry out of your mind.
Yeah,
You're
no,
always
for sure,
thinking about
for
that
sure.
church, what's going
Yeah.
on at that church. You're really not enjoying yourself. Maybe in the second week, you can kind of like start slacking
Right.
down and say, I need to do something for me.
Yeah.
And that's what I would encourage all of the pastors to do. Look out for you. Save yourself. This is what it says. Save yourself. Even when you board an aircraft and they're giving safety
Put on
instructions,
your
what
mask
do they
first.
tell you?
Put
Before
on your
you
mask
put
first.
that
Yeah.
thing on somebody else, put it on yourself first. And that's the word that I want to leave to the pastors and those who want to become pastors, that the glitz, the glamour, people pulling on you, people calling on you, these things, that looks glorious. But take care of yourself, not only from a financial standpoint, of putting some things in place for your own financial benefit, but take care of your health as well. Exercise, walk, go and do some things that you can get that stress off of you.
Yeah.
Because stress is a killer, man. That's
Absolutely.
why they only allow a president to stay in office for 8 years.
Exactly.
And
That's the
you've
reason.
never seen a president come in with black hair and leave out with black hair unless
Right.
they dye in it.
Exactly.
They leave out with gray hair because of the pressure and the stress. Pastoring is right along that same line.
Absolutely. And let me make sure we put it out here because we're in a unique county. He's not retiring tomorrow.
I don't know.
This ain't a this ain't a benediction. It ain't nothing being broke on the legacy rule. We just talking about what we talking about.
Yes.
I love to see like healthy pastors, like
Yes.
that's enjoying their lives,
Yes.
that's living life and just really not letting it get to them. I went through a situation and I thank God for. I think every pastor needs a pastor. I think every pastor needs a pastor. I'm grateful for my pastor because he put me through a Psalms 23 situation. He made me to lie down in green pastures. Sometimes you got to have a moment where someone comes and a general comes and pull you off the battlefield and say, hey, you know what, take a break, take a break. And I want to tell some pastor who's out there just getting pounded by the enemy, because the devil don't fight you for where you are. He fights you for where you're headed. Yes. And so sometimes when you're getting attack after attack after attack, you need a pastor to say, hey, come back, sit down, regroup, and then you're ready to go again. I think it's important for every pastor to take a sabbatical. Sabbaticals are extremely necessary because you're out here now. And, pastors aren't, I know they see us in the pulpit on Sundays, but the church needs a CEO the remainder of the week. And very few churches have the budget to put a CFO or a CEO or a project manager or whatever you want to call it into a church setting. We just don't have the budget for that. So that pastor is not only preaching, but he's negotiating lease. He's trying to make sure that the bills are paid. He's in all kind of meetings. We just had a pastor's appreciation for our pastor. And one of the things that I heard almost everyone get up and say, he always answers his phone. If it's 3:00 in the morning, he answers his phone. And so they're hearing, oh, he's such an available pastor. And as a pastor brain, I'm like, yes. My poor pastor, yes. Why is he, oh my God, like that's a lot on him, and he's also dealing with business, international, and all this other stuff that's going on. What we think is success is just, it's like I'm in my head, I'm like, oh my God, is he getting a break? Is he getting proper sleep? They said that way to great health is 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I don't know any pastor that gets 7 to 9 hours of sleep that's not incapacitated, on some levels. And so we're always up, we're always at it, we're always, digging in. And so I took a sabbatical. I took a break from December until today. I'm still enjoying this little level break. Yes. And I'm learning something at 43 years old. I don't have a hobby. Mm-hmm. Somebody said, what do you do for fun? I have no clue what I do for fun because it ain't very much fun time available. Do you have a hobby?
Well, I love fishing.
Okay.
That's my main hobby. And then working in my yard, man, trust me, that's a stress release. People say, Pastor, why don't you get a lawn, man? No, I've got many sermons, good sermons out there, man, with those weeds.
Oh, we know about your Thursday yard.
That's my thing, man. But, I love fishing. When you was mentioning about every pastor need a pastor, my pastor just passed away a couple months ago, Pastor Harry Riley, in Riverdale, Georgia. And, we had plans, man. Last time we talked on the phone, I'm coming down, he was from this area, Polk County area, and he was coming down. We were going to do some fishing. We was going to go to Cattleman's. You got to go to Texas Cattleman with Pastor Riley. You got to go to Waffle House. What is Waffle House, Texas Cattleman, and fishing. But that never happened. We never, when I got a call and said he was, transitioning, it blew my mind because the last time I had talked with him, he was vibrant. He was alive. Yes, every pastor need a pastor. Then you got to find something that you like to do to get rid of some of that stress. I'm telling you, some of the most stressful times in my life to other people, it was some of the most glorious times because everything looked good on the outside until the reality came in. And I found myself, I said, look, a little boy from Lakeland, Florida, E.T. Pickett, you find yourself $1 point something million in debt. How did that happen? How did I end up $1.2 million in debt. You know, I hear people say, man, I owe that credit card company $10,000, $8,000. Man, I'm talking about 1.2. You know, I say most people don't know how many zeros is in a million. And I found out there's a lot of zeros, in a million. And I got to pay this off. I got to do this. My name is on there. You know, there was a lot of stressful nights, man. Nope. You know, when I come to church on Sunday morning, people not asking, hey, pastor, what the church need? You know, I mean, how can I help you get out of that debt? Pastor, can you go to the school for my child? Pastor, can you do this? Pastor, can you do that? Pastor, I need prayer for this. But I found out that not many was concerned about me as a person.
Absolutely.
Behind that pastor title was a person. And that person, E.T. Pickett, was hurting. He was stressed out. But nobody came to my rescue. So that's when I say save yourself. That's been the biggest thing in my life. Pastor, save yourself. It doesn't mean neglecting the people.
Absolutely.
It's not neglecting the people. It's looking out for you, because what's going to happen? I went to a pastor's conference one time, and this pastor got up. He said, okay, are you supermen? Let me tell you what's going to happen if something happens to you. They're going to get up, and they're going to talk about what a great man of God you were. How you blessed them this way and that way. They're going to cry. They're going to weep. They're going to come to the funeral. Everybody's going to want to speak and be on a part of the program. Some going to get mad if they don't. But the next week, they're going to be looking for another pastor, and they're going to looking for another church and continue to move on. So you take care of yourself.
Wow, that's huge. That's huge. And we're wrapping up. You know, thank you so much for being with us today, Pastor Pickett. If you had to leave just a few moments, or a few words to a brand new pastor who's just starting out, we know we need to save ourselves. But what other nuggets would you give that new pastor?
Number one, make sure you're called. That's key. You know, some sent, some just went.
We need a psychiatric evaluation.
Some
make
sent,
sure.
some just went. But make sure you call. And the number one, love God, because if you love God, you'll love God's people. And realize that things happen. There's shift, there's ebbs, and there flows, and just be, you know, don't quit. You know, one thing that Pastor Greg Poe used to stress to us in our leadership class, he would say, I will not quit, therefore I cannot be defeated. I'm not going to quit. If everybody walk out today, I get my radio broadcast, because this is what God has called me to do. This is what I was in my mother, before I was in my mother's womb. This is something God had called me to do.
Wow.
So I'm not moved by numbers. I preach to 10 just as quickly as I preach to 10,000. You know, don't quit. And make sure you're called. If you do those things, if you make sure you're called, number one, and don't quit, number two, you're all right.
Wow. So the purpose of the Legacy Room, we're going to talk about faith, finance. We're going to talk about things that's happening outside of just the four walls of worship.
Yes.
I'm going to utilize all of my experience from the funeral industry, from financial industry, and in the pastoral experience. And it's just been a black man in America. And I want to make sure that we talk more than just the right now, but leaving a legacy. So I want to thank you for being my first person here.
Man, thank you.
When I got Barack Obama, I'm going to say, hey, before we take your picture, the first person here was E. Telephone Pickett III, Lakeland's pastor.
You know, you're my brother, man. We've been together for a long time. We've been in and out. You know, we've seen the ups and downs of ministry, but nothing separated our friendship, our relationship, man. And I value that more than anything else. When pastors can get along, when pastors can stay together, you know. And many times we allow the sheep to separate the shepherds. And just for us to continue to be friends, man, I value our relationship greatly, that I can call upon you and you answer that phone. You can answer that phone, and that means a whole lot to me. I want to
thank you so much, Pastor. I appreciate you. I was on the phone with a pastor in California. We hosted If My People. You remember that some years ago?
Yes.
At your church, and he asked about you. He said, how's the pastor that we hosted If My People at? I told him you was doing well. He said
Yes.
the brother has a great spirit of excellence.
Is that
And
Noel?
so that's Noel Jones.
Man, he got married on me,
Yeah, he
didn't
done
he?
got married on you. We next in line for a miracle.
Come on, Jesus.
Yeah, and so I love the fact that people equate Word of Life ministry, E-Teller for Pickett, with excellence. And it's good that I don't have to lie. I can vouch he's a good brother in real life.
Thank you, my
And
brother.
so thank you so much. Thank you, HB Holmes Jr.,
Yes.
Word of Life Ministry, Rhema Word of Faith
Yes.
International. This is a great church to go to heaven from.
Yes.
And so I'm proud to be a product of Pastor H.B. Holmes Jr. I appreciate him sowing the seed into the legacy room, and that's greater to come. Thank you so much for watching. Satan is on the loose, but God is in control.
Amen.